All right, I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning meeting for January 8th, 2025. Let's do a roll call, please.
Arel? Here. Budke? Here. Kleva? Present. Kuhn? Here. Holt?
Here.
Mattson? Here. Reichert?
Here.
Sandy? Wasvik?
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right, I think first order of business, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Chair Wasvik. I just wanted to announce Jamie Lunsky, who has been with us serving on this board for 6 years, I think is what we counted. This is, I think last meeting was his last, and so we wanted to bring him up, and as is kind of our tradition, we hand out a plaque, which he can do with what he wants. But so this one says, with deepest gratitude for your 6 years of dedicated service to the City of Grand Forks Planning and Zoning Commission 2018 to 2024. So I'll ask Jamie to come up, and if he wants to say something, he certainly can. Chair, I don't know if you want to as well, but thank you.
Thank you, guys. I do. Jamie, thank you very much for serving on this committee. You were a great wealth of knowledge on many things that maybe I didn't have, and I think we all worked well with you. And we appreciate your service and dedication. I'd shake your hand, but I'm a little bit wounded.
Next time. Okay.
I'd love to.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
With that, reading and approval of the minutes from the December 4th, 2024 meeting, Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert, second by Mr. Budke. Any further discussion on the minutes? Not seeing any hands. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved as submitted.
Before we move on, one item as well. I just want to introduce our new planning commissioner as well, Derek Holt, who's this is his first meeting. So he's already we've already tried to answer a few questions already for him. So he's certainly versed already on the first meeting. So
Appreciate it. Thank you, Ren.
thank you.
Welcome, Derek. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
You're good. All right, public hearings, final approvals, petitions, and minor changes.
3-1, plat of Dinks 4-3 subdivision located at 1600 South 42nd Street.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. So this is a replat request that was also heard last month. It is a replat of 6 existing lots to create Dinks 4-3 subdivision that would consist of 5 lots that would allow for the development of Altru Sports Complex as well as the future Children's Museum. There's been one change to the plat since last month's meeting. So here, let me zoom in a little bit. So here, the change is that the access control along 17th Avenue South here was shortened to 180 feet. That change was made to enable a write-in access to the future Children's Museum lot. We did have internal conversations, and with talking with the city traffic engineering team, it was found that it is feasible and will not cause significant traffic issues. So with that, staff is recommending approval. I'll stand for any questions.
Mr. Budke?
Yeah, I just asked the committee for a recusal on this, same as last month.
All right, second. All those in favor of Mr. Budke being recused, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Mr. Budke, you are recused. We might start calling you on some of these in the audience to negotiate some of it, but go ahead. Public hearing. No questions, sorry, no questions for Mrs. Johnson this time. Open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience want to step up and address item 3.1? Please do so at this time. Not seeing anybody, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Mattson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kuhn. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 3-1 passes unanimously. 3-2.
3-2, resolution for access control variance to subdivision regulations for Lot 1, Block 1, Shady Ridge 10-3 sub located at 5807 Adams Drive.
Ms. Edwardson.
Good evening. So we're out in the southeast corner of town, Shady Ridge Court and Adams Drive. Kind of a coulee thing, and the river runs just off to the east of this image here. the homeowner is requesting to build a single-family detached home on the corner lot 5807. But Shady Ridge Court has a holdover of access control back from when Coal Creek Drive was originally planned as a townhouse development to continue all the way north to Shady Ridge Court. And at that time, we wanted that access to come off of Adams Drive and Coal Creek. So the access control was put onto Shady Ridge. That development style has since been abandoned. These are now single-family detached homes. Lots are being sold as single-family detached. The homeowner would like to take a driveway access off of Shady Ridge Court here and have the front of the house orientated to Adams. So Shady Ridge is a local roadway. There's no reason, the traffic volumes and things like that, the local roadway function is fine. The local roadway still has parameters, have to be so far away from the corner and things like that they're abiding by. But there isn't really, without this townhouse development, there really isn't a reason to continue the access control, so we're requesting to remove it. So with that, could stand for any questions.
Any questions before we open up the public hearing? My only question is, why not come off of Adams for the entrance instead of Shady, but just
I think-
seeing all the homes lined up coming off of Adams there.
Yep,
But-
I think they just fell in love with the house style, and from a traffic volume and city perspective, there really isn't any traffic implications to not, so.
Okay, with that, I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to address 3-2, please do so at this time. Not seeing anybody, close the public hearing, bring it back to the committee. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert. Second by Ms. Earl. I saw Mr. Holt too, but any further discussion? Not seeing any hands. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. 3-3.
3-3, replat of Lot 2, Block 1, Matachek, second edition, located at 4326 North Columbia Road.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. So this is, to the north is, to the left here. I could get my direction, but not my, so this is the Matachek farmstead, and I think his current homestead is about in this location. A few years ago, maybe it's even more than that, they did plat off an existing house that was on this lot 1. So that was already existing, and he sold that off, which is what we were allowing for, as long as they met minimums at that time. So we allowed that to occur. Now, it remained about a 32-acre parcel was the remainder, and in this case, it had one housing unit on it. About 20 years ago, the city went through and we put in rules that said one housing unit per 40 units or per 40 acres out in the ET area. So we were trying to limit the amount of new residences that were going on out in the county in our 2-mile area around the city. This would be different than that because he's going to have about 1 per 15 acres. And in this case, I just wanted to highlight that this is going to be a variance from what our current code is. The existing house will stay on Lot A. Lot B would be a buildable lot. It's pasture land right now, and it does have some outbuilding, I believe, on it now. But I think his intent, and Frank, the applicant, is here and can certainly speak to this as well. But I think he has this Lot B for a potential future spot for him, potentially something that would fit more one level, that type of thing for his future. This is obviously land that's been in his name for many years, and I think his intent is to have his long-term home on there as well. So, but with that, that's just the pieces I wanted to highlight. We put access control lines in there that were consistent with what we had before. The one unit will still be in this location, and then the other one, there's an existing opening about in this location. This is the English Coulee diversion on the south side of the property, and then the Red River is on the east. So it's kind of a condensed unit, and then there's multiple units that run up along this road here. And this is Columbia Road, ironically, is where Columbia Road ends up meshing up with the Red River, just with the way things align up in this area, for those who are familiar with the area. I'm happy to answer any questions, but the applicant is here as well.
Mr. Reichert?
You said we have minimum 15 acre lots. The lots north of that are 5 acres.
So actually the density requirement is 1 per 40 acres. These ones, this one that we allowed, it met that 2.5 acre, which is what we wanted to see that size. It didn't meet our density of 1 per 40, but it was an existing lot. And then these other ones, as you go to the north, they were all prior to that rule.
okay.
But the one thing, the reason we still want that 2.5 is when you get up into this area, you're dealing with drain fields, and you need that bigger area. So that's one of the reasons you don't see city-sized lots out in the township areas, the rural areas, just with the way things are set up.
Any other questions? All right, I will open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience want to step up and address this item, please do so at this time. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Phil Kramer.
Phil, can you turn that on?
That one there, okay. Good evening. Phil Kramer, 2696 Fox Farm Road, which is north of where Frank lives. I'm also a Falconer Township Supervisor. Was made apprised of this replatting for Frank Matichak, and I take the opportunity to give you the township's version of our take on this. Our township zoning requirements are 2.5 inch, at least a 2.5 acre lot. Frank's going to have 16 acres here. We see no problem with that at all. We'd actually like to see him replat it from our standpoint. And the point was made too that there are a lot of spots just north of this that are 5 acre lots, that are a lot of housing in the Fox Farm subdivision and areas north of that. So we see this, a 15, 16 acre replat of it would be not an issue as far as the township is concerned.
Any questions for Mr. Kramer? Thank you, Phil. All right, anybody else? The one, the only. I figured you want to come back up. Welcome. Please state your name for the,
Frank Matichak, 4150 Columbia Road North.
thank you, Mr.
Just a little
Matichak.
clarification for Mr. Reichert. When the, am I not on?
Okay. When the ET first came out, the 2 mile range for planning and zoning, it was a 5 acre lot that was required at that time. And right now in this section 21-15250 Faulkner, there are 21 5 acre lots that are to the north of me. I believe you own one of them, Mr. Reichert. Anyway, so that's why it was that. When, was it 20 years ago we rewrote the code? Kurt Kroon, Doug Christensen, myself, and Paula Lee and Bill, whatever, the park board guy, we rewrote the code with Mrs. Gray. And one of the things we did at that time is we put it down to 2.5 acre lots. And the reason we did that was the county had 2.5 acre lots. And as the 2 mile range, as the ET moved out, these people would try to sell their houses and they had non-conforming lots because they did not have 5 acres. So we decided to be consistent with the county and have 2.5 acre lots. So far in Faulkner Township, where Phil's talking about, they all have 5 acre lots. Nobody has decided to split off their lot and sell off a 2.5 acre lot, which they could possibly do. No. Mr. Brooks says no, but whatever. We'd see what happens if somebody wanted to do it. But technically, it's a 2.5 acre lot now. Okay, this particular piece of property has 30 some acres. It did have 40 acres at one time, went into the English Coulee diversion. So one of the things you may want to look at in your planning horoscope, whatever, is the 1 in 40. I think it's a very bad thing. I didn't like it when we went through the code with that. It was supposed to save farmland and discourage growth outside of the city, outside of the ET. Well, you know, guys know what happens. They just go a little further out. And that's happening all the time. So you might want to look at the 1 in 40. But whatever. Just thank you for that. I just wanted to let you know how the lots worked. This would be the second biggest lot in that section. There's another lot that's 38 acres with one house, and I'm not sure what his plans are. So, in the notes here, it said that I was retiring, which is true. I am moving, which is not true. So we'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Matichak before we let him go? Thanks. All right. Well, anyone else in the public hearing? I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commissioner, Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Second by Mr. Mattson, moved by Mr. Reichert. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. 3-4.
3-4, appeal to corridor overlay district requirements located at 4402 16th Avenue North.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. So this one's going to be for a corridor overlay. It's a little bit different than the corridor overlay request that we had for the Starbucks. For those who were here, was that 3 or 4 months ago? That was on Washington. This one is along the interstate. And as soon as I get this pulled back up again, I apologize, I double clicked and closed out Frank's and this one. But so the request on this one, it's just north of the McDonald's on Gateway Drive, and the building, which is, this computer's going nuts on me. Here's what the building, the original request had, it is a requirement to be at least 50% of the allowable materials. And so that's brick, it's stone, and some other things. To have it 100% metal is not allowed along certain corridors, I-29 being one of them. This is going to be similar to that. It is in the middle of a bunch of buildings that are all from the interstate on that north end, all metal. But the rules are what they are in this case. And so our recommendation as staff was to follow through with that. This is a little bit more context in terms of where that site is compared to where we are. Here's your I-29 is out in this area. North is to the left here again. They're accessing off of 16th Avenue Circle. So this side is the one that's, it's 125 feet long. And to meet our code in this case, they're required to be 50% of one of those allowable materials. Their initial submittal to us was brick. They're coming back and saying, you know what, I do want to make a request for this. They could certainly put in that brick, but their request to us is, can we take a look at this and see if this makes sense in this case? So the applicant is here, and I just wanted to kind of preface as to why we got to where we're at. They're in the process of building it with the intent. Their original intent was the submittal that they had to us with 50% brick, but the request is, does this make sense along that stretch? So I'll kind of let him speak to that as opposed to me saying and trying to stand up here and pitch as to why we shouldn't be following code. So with that, unless anybody has any questions for me at this point.
Anything for Mr. Brooks? None. Okay.
So staff recommendation is not approval?
Yeah, I'm following through, kind of following what has been the practice of planning and zoning last time when we had the Starbucks, but I can certainly see where this one would feel a little bit different than Starbucks. It's not Washington, it's I-29. It's I-29 from the north. It's in the middle of a bunch of metal buildings. This may feel like we're, you know, fixing one window in a sea of a bunch of cracked windows. So I can certainly see why his request is, can we at least have a conversation on this one? So.
Mr. Budke.
Yeah, one other clarification. The overlay that we're talking about is from I-29.
Correct.
And am I understanding that the elevation that's in here is just a single elevation? So that means this requirement doesn't apply to the other three faces of the building?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's the way our code is that it's on that face that faces that corridor.
All right, well, with that, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to step up and address 3-4, please do so at this time. Please state your name and address for the record.
Mike Opp, 3820 Fairview Drive. Actually, the reason we're asking for this is we think the building will look better with all four sides the same. I mean, we're in the real estate business. We want the building to look as good as it can. And yeah, I mean, I think you saw the elevation with the brick. I mean, it doesn't look beautiful. There's windows on all four sides, and then we have the wainscoting. So just to have one side different, yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Opp? None?
I will state, I mean, the way the site's laid out, internal to the site, you won't see that brick. It'll only be from the corridor, which is what the intent is.
What was that?
If you're internal to the site, you'll never see that brick. You enter in the site off of 16th Avenue North.
It's just the interstate.
It's just that interstate side. We're certainly welcoming brick on the other four sides, but I don't know anybody would go on the south side here. But certainly on the front, maybe doing it around the doors or something like that, or some people will do that. But where the code requires it, it is intended to be, the corridor overlay district was put into place, and it was a tough ordinance for those who were here kind of working through. Our intent of that was to try to make our corridors look better coming into the city. I think it's worked in a lot of ways, but when you put together an ordinance for one size fits all, it does get very difficult, and it doesn't work in all cases. And I can certainly, we put in the appeal section on purpose to say what makes sense, what doesn't, because it's really difficult to write a code flat for everything. And so at least I understood that there was an opening here to have a discussion of how do we make that work in some of these areas.
You see the shrubbery stopping and starting. When I'm looking at the Google map with Alex. And, I mean, is that something we could do?
Well, we
You know,
plan on.
something you're planning on?
Yeah, we plan on planting trees around. This is part of a two-building property. So, to have the buildings match is kind of important to us. And then this is an opportunity where we can come around and landscape. And we did plan on planting trees, and we want it to look good. And it's going to look good. Actually, the wainscoting's starting to go on, and it looks really good. I mean, I think it's going to look better with that around all four sides with the brand-new steel than it is with one side, whatever, but. It's going to be the best-looking building in the area.
Is this the building?
Just gotta be careful where we stop and start,
Yeah. I mean, we'll follow the rules. It just, we happen to think the building will be better. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking for this. If we thought it would be better with brick, we'd have brick.
Yeah, ironically, you're actually seeing the building being built there. So that's the location of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, here,
We wish that one was better too. But that, that is what it is.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Opp? Thanks. Bring back to the commission, close the public hearing, all that. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert.
Just to clarify, approval of,
Of the variance. No, of the variance.
the appeal, yeah.
The appeal. Oh. Yeah, move approval of the appeal.
I got Mr. Clava as a second.
Doesn't have to have brick on it.
Right.
I will second that.
I got Mr. Clava as a second, but you can third it. With that, Mr. Budke?
Yeah, one last question. Ryan, could you I think you said this, but just once more, why the adjacent properties don't have similar materials? Like, I appreciate what you said about the corridor overlay. I think that they're, like, it's valuable that that exists. But it like, from the moment I read this, it seemed deeply strange that all of the adjacent buildings look one way, and then this would be required to have something quite different.
Correct, yeah. So those other ones, it's all, the corridor overlay came in about 08 timeframe. All those other buildings are pre-existing to that.
Okay.
So that's the reason. If one of these were doing an addition, they wouldn't need to do it until they get 25%. That's the way we wrote that as well. So if there's an addition onto this and it's at 30% more space that they're doing along the frontage, then you gotta add it in. And a couple of those that we've had, they kind of look a little strange, but that we kind of had to set that line somewhere. Right. But in this case, I can certainly understand the right-of-way is bigger on the interstate too, so it does feel like there is different gauges that we kind of have to look at. So that's one of the reasons as well for that appeal.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Budke. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. 3-4 passes with 1 nay. All right. No preliminary approvals, reports from the planning department?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. 5-1.
AARP ND housing presentation and discussion.
Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, so thank you. We have Josh Aspig, who's the state director of AARP. He's, this is kind of a continuation of our education piece, I guess, we've been doing, not only for you guys, but for staff as well. It's been really good to kind of dig into some things and bring in some experts. And that's really a timely issue right now as well with the state legislature getting going. So I'll turn it over to Josh here, who's made the trip from Bismarck. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan, and Chairman and Planning and Zoning Commission. Thanks for having me. As Ryan said, my name is Josh Askvig, and with me online tonight is Summer Joss. Summer is a Government Affairs Director with ARP who deals with housing policy. So when Ryan said expert, I had to remind myself that's Summer, not me, when it comes to this. But I want to first do a couple things and then let Summer talk a little bit about kind of missing middle housing, why AARP cares, some of the opportunities I think as you are having this discussion that you should be aware of that are free to you and that we would encourage you to look at and take use of. For those of you who don't know, I often get asked, do I sell insurance? Yes, AARP endorses insurance products, but my job as a state director is to really do three things. It's to advocate for people 50 and older, to empower them to choose how they live as they age. It's to provide non-biased, good public information for older adults and their families to make decisions for them on how they want to age and be able to empower them to choose how they live as they age. And last but certainly not least, encourage community involvement and a lot of times through volunteering and in dialogue on how they can make their communities better and stronger. I should also warn you, so when I get grilled from Commissioner Kuhn over here, we're very familiar with Commissioner Kuhn. He's an active volunteer with AARP through our driver safety program and coordinates our state program. So if he's picking on me, I probably deserve it tonight as part of it. As Ryan said, before I turn it over to Summer and get to this, a couple of things. The number one concern, or one of the top concerns we continually hear from folks when we survey folks every 3 years on what's on their minds as they age. In North Dakota, we continually hear, how do they stay safe and independent in the communities they call home? And I want to emphasize two things, safe and independent in communities they call home. Because what we're seeing in many instances, and this is not just in our rural communities in North Dakota, but in all communities across North Dakota, is there's often a struggle when it comes to how do I want to downsize. I no longer have kids in my home. I've trying to maybe having some mobility challenges or other issues and want to be able to have options. And so what does that look like? I don't need to tell you. I can tell you what it looks like in Bismarck, but I don't live in Grand Forks. But I know a little bit that finding that housing that fits not just older adults, but oftentimes young families, those looking for starter homes, it's kind of the same side of the coin here, is a real struggle. And it's it's especially a struggle if you're looking for anything affordable. So tonight, our goal for Summer and I is really to just advance the discussion or presentation you had in October or November of last year, and then talk a little bit about what's happening or likely going to happen, or at least be discussed in the state legislature, and why the discussions you're having now and the steps you take now, you're really in a good spot to hopefully get ahead of the curve a little bit, so that if and when something comes out of the state legislature, that you're prepared to hopefully capitalize. So with that, I'll introduce Summer. Summer, are you on? I see you.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. I don't think we see your presentation yet.
I'm sharing my presentation, but I'm not sure it's on
It
the
is on.
screen.
Okay, they all see
Okay.
it, Summer, so I'll turn it
All
over
right,
to Summer.
perfect.
So,
Thank you so much, Josh. And I was juggling through tech issues, so I'm so glad it's all sorted out. And when Josh or anyone calls me an expert, I get that imposter syndrome every time. But I'll try to do a presentation where we're going to talk about our middle housing priorities. The first slide, basically, this is one slide I always share.
Summer, just so you know, I think they're seeing it from our end, so when you want to advance, let me know and I'll just advance them from here.
Okay, I just advanced the second slide. Can you guys see the second one? Yep, okay. So as I was saying, this is one slide I always use in a lot of presentations that I give throughout the country, is just to show how complex housing advocacy or housing issues are, right? If someone comes and tells you that we should solve the housing crisis, the first thing your response should be that which part are you talking about? Because there are different parts of housing that needs to be taken care of, from land use regulations to zoning to property tax issues, how the funding is happening by the government, or are there any tax incentives being given to developers, so on and so forth. In this case, we're going to talk about land use. We're going to talk about zoning reforms that we've been working on throughout the country. Before we, I hope you can see on the next slide that I went through. Before I even begin talking about what middle housing or what missing middle housing is, I just want to share the recent survey that we did. It's a national survey called the Home and Community Preference Survey that AARP does every couple of years. This was released in November 2024, where older adults specifically have mentioned that more than 3/4 of older adults want to stay in their home. They want to age independently. More than half the respondents say that. Almost 3/4 they say that they want to stay in the community, and they understand that if they're going to relocate from their community, they are going to face a lot of costs. So there is enough evidence to show that the older adults need some housing options. They need to also age in place or stay in the community that they belong to. There are various reasons for that. And one of the solutions that we have been working across the country is something called middle housing. A lot of terms you may have heard. It's in other places you may have heard it being called missing middle housing. We like to call it middle housing because it's not missing anymore. There's a lot of traction happening across the country where people are realizing that they need more housing options. They need more housing supply. Not anymore. They don't want only single family or skyscrapers being built. This is why it's called middle housing. It's because it provides you an option for duplexes, triplexes, courtyard apartment, bungalow court, so on and so forth. It's not something which is only single family, which is serving a specific family but not creating that entire neighborhood or community that we need. But also it's not the high rises where there is a massive increase of density suddenly. The next slide. The characteristic of what is middle housing development? It basically it's something, as I mentioned, something in the middle. It is of neighborhood scale. It can easily blend with the single family homes, even some mid-rise and high-rise apartments. it also is market driven, because right now we are seeing that the high cost that the housing has, it has led to a situation where people want more options which are more cheaper than a single family, or cheaper than a high rise which may have other costs involved in it. It's also efficient design. There are lots of if there is land available, and if you can build more housing and create a community out of it, it makes a lot of sense. And one of the biggest things that we have seen is it creates walkability. It's simple economic sense that if you have more people moving in a neighborhood, you will have more. I'm hoping that we'll have a more walkable neighborhood, and you'll have more businesses now moving in, more businesses being created so that they can cater to that neighborhood, and that's where walkability makes a huge difference. Next slide. What's the significance? What's the significance of missing middle housing? It's, as I mentioned, it creates, it increases housing supply. It's also departure from large cities. As I had mentioned, we don't want those, high rises everywhere. People just want to stay away from that, but they also want a more compact living rather than only single family. That's where it helps. And it's also a new way of thinking housing for renters and buyers. As I had mentioned in the previous survey, that lots of our older adults want to have housing options, and this is another way of creating housing options for older adults. What are the different benefits? It may be repetitive, but I just want to re-emphasize that it is very much a smart land use. If you're creating more middle housing developments, or you're allowing more middle housing being built, along with single family, obviously there is not a single family middle housing legislation that eliminates single family. No one is saying that there should not be any single family homes. What we are saying is other forms of housing or options should also be allowed, and it should not be an exclusive single family neighborhood. That's what we are striving for. It also reduces transportation costs, because if you have more walkability happening, especially for older adults, if you can, you're not relied on cars anymore. You can just walk to the nearest grocery or to the medical center. It makes a huge difference for older adults. Next slide. Why do we support middle housing? As I mentioned, it allows for lower cost housing, expands home ownership opportunities. It's not only for older adults, but sometimes, especially the younger generation also is having a tough time buying their first home. This does provide an opportunity for the younger generation to also be a homeowner. So it does allow that. It is smart land use and sustainability, but it also preserves neighborhoods. The more people are, as I mentioned, it's not a massive increase of density. It's a sporadic increase, gentle increase of density, and creates a neighborhood requirement or environment where lots of families can be around each other and can be helpful to each other also. And it's not only single detached homes. Across the country, there has been a lot of statewide legislation that has passed. I just wanted to share 4 really important ones that we actually worked on. And the one I want to emphasize is the Montana legislation that happened a couple of years ago. Montana did pass some significant housing legislation. One of them was Senate Bill 382, which allowed for comprehensive land use. It allowed for options for the local government to use choose basically out of 13 zoning reforms, 5 of them, which included also allowing multifamily housing. Another great one that recently passed was Florida Senate Bill 102. It was an omnibus bill, but it allowed for more multifamily housing and also created more tax exemptions and incentives for middle housing projects. Next slide. Josh, I think this is yours.
Thanks, Summer. And Summer will be on to after I get through the next few slides, if you've got questions as we're going along. So Summer kind of covered the broad range, and a little bit was probably a refresher from what you heard earlier. But so you're aware, if you're not already, that this is a high priority discussion happening in North Dakota. So former Governor Doug Burgum in November, or was it December? I can't remember, launched the North Dakota Housing Initiative, or announced the Housing Initiative recommendations. He launched the Housing Initiative last year in May, and they met 3 times, July, August, and September, and came up with a number of ideas. But in the initiative, they really had kind of four goals. One is to pave the way for moderate income households to make that transition, about making that turnover and continuing some of that churn in the housing market where folks are continuing to advance as their income advances. And what we're often finding in communities across North Dakota right now is individuals are stuck because they don't have the income to jump to the next level, or they're being stretched thin because they're having to jump to a housing price range that stretches them probably in some instances beyond. Second, really looking at how do we embrace the full range of housing choices. I'll speak from Bismarck experience, and having served 8 years on the City Commission in Bismarck. In my 8 years on the City Commission in Bismarck, we approved a lot of single-family home lots, and we approved a lot of large apartment complexes. We had then a handful of PUD that were trying to get into the missing middle housing. I will tell you from my time there and talking to developers, not all, but a part of the battle on that was having to go through the PUD process and basically having to retrofit what they wanted to do into code and get variances and allowances. Makes it difficult and is a disincentive, at least our experience in Bismarck, for them to do this type of work. And so helping to try and help communities understand how can they help embrace some of that. Third, make some targeted investments to bridge affordability gaps. And then fourth, certainly, I'm sure something your city council hears about, if you don't as well, help lowering property tax burdens were kind of their high-level goals. And he outlined a $96 million proposal. There's a couple of pieces, specifically two, that I want to highlight for you that I think you're going to hear about more next week in Governor Armstrong's budget address. I don't know what's in his budget address, and I certainly won't pretend to speak for him, but I can tell you in conversations with them that he certainly has housing on his mind as well, and that he's well aware of the need to do something around housing. I would also tell you the good news about the North Dakota Housing Initiative. They had some very influential legislators who were bought in, and so this will be a discussion that's happening in the legislative session that just kicked off yesterday. In the proposal that was outlined by Governor Burgum, there were two specific subsections. One is this vibrant local housing market. There's about little over $22.5 million, and a portion of that funding is for neighborhood builder grant programs for small-scale urban housing projects. Code for missing middle, age-friendly design type of housing. In addition, there's some financing innovations. I had a great coffee meeting with City Administrator Phelan before I came over here today, and he was talking about how the city of Grand Forks already leverages, some of the infrastructure funds and revolving loan funds, but where the struggle often comes is when you're looking at these types of developments or doing multifamily, entry-level, age-in-place type of work, that there aren't loan programs or loan buy-down programs that are focused on that. They're either focused on single-family or large-scale apartment complex development. The good news is, at least in what was outlined, there is a portion, about $38.5 million, that would look at low-interest construction loans, so really targeting those age-friendly designs, middle housing type of work, and or things that leverage existing infrastructure. So some exciting areas that we were certainly excited to have a hand in helping shape and put forward. And I think the good news for you is, being where you're at in your code process, nothing's certainly going to happen until the end of April, just in terms of the legislature meeting. Anything that would happen would go into effect in June, and so you have a little bit of time to make sure that if funding is approved, and I would knock on wood, I don't want to jinx it on day 2 of the legislature, but when funding is approved, that you're in a position to be able to capitalize on it. Because if we know anything from our experience with the Housing Incentive Fund in North Dakota, as soon as that funding's made available, it's gone. And so making sure that communities are ready to be able to say, here's what we're ready to do and where we're ready to act on it is something you're going to want to make sure you do. There are some challenges to missing middle housing. I think Summer kind of touched on all of these, and I'll just gloss over them. And I want to be clear, as I referenced, I sat on a board. I understand you get feedback a lot on the things that people don't like. about them. We're well aware of those too, and I think those are all things that you need to consider. But we also need to consider the idea that we continually hear regular stories about, I live in a current 3,000 square foot home. I'm ready to downsize and find something. There's nothing available for me. I'm going to pay more for less square footage, and I'm not sure how that's going to work, especially as my income has changed in a direction in the opposite of what's happening. And so what communities can do, understanding that. But I didn't want to ignore, and we're not Pollyannish to say, oh, if you do this, everything goes away and everyone's going to love it. We get it. We know how that is. The last 2 slides I want to leave you with. This is not something we just talk about. We've been doing work on this in North Dakota. I know your staff shared stuff in, was it November or October, when you presented about some of the work we've done. I just want to remind you, if you want to see what this looks like in North Dakota communities, we've done lot test fits of, we went to Milner, North Dakota and said, hey, you've got a vacant lot. What would it look like to do a missing middle housing project in Milner, North Dakota that would fit your community's designs, needs? I'll be honest, they haven't built it yet because they have challenges in terms of finding builders in Milner, North Dakota, and funding issues and those types of things. But we at least started the conversation of, no, you can build these things and make them look like single-family homes and fit into neighborhoods that don't cause blight in people's minds or devalue people's homes. Oftentimes, they may add value. In addition, one of the things, and this is something I mentioned to Administrator Phelan and something that might be of use down the road, we often forget that this isn't a new type of housing development. Often it was, and it still does exist in your communities. And so we've done missing middle walking tours where we've done it in Bismarck and in West Fargo are the 2 communities where we pulled folks like you all, city leaders, developers, and said, we're going to meet at this place, we're going to walk this roughly 1 mile route, and we're pointing out, yeah, when you hear that folks don't like missing middle housing, here's 3 examples right here in this neighborhood. Often those were things that were done before your city code was developed in the 70s and 80s that outlawed those types of developments. So they've been grandfathered in, but they do exist and folks have no issues with them. It's just that it's, again, a new concept. And then last but certainly not least, we worked with the city of Fargo last year and did a missing middle housing design competition where, again, we've painted a picture of this is what it could look like in North Dakota. This isn't just a Portland, Oregon thing or a Chicago, Illinois or Omaha, Nebraska. We can make this fit and look and feel like North Dakota. And I want to leave you on that. I didn't come up here to say this is how you should do it or what you should do. I came up here to say, how can we help facilitate conversations so you can figure out what's going to work best for you in Grand Forks, in your community's needs and your community's desires. And with that, I come not just with ideas and recommendations, I come with resources. And as I mentioned at the front end, free resources. So there are a number of those. I know you all got at least a digital copy. If you want hard copies of the Missing Middle, Discovering and Developing Missing Middle Housing Guide, that was just updated. Summer, was that just last year that got updated?
I think a couple of years ago.
Okay, and then
the one which is new is the local model ordinance.
This one, and I have a hard copy that I'm happy to leave with anybody here, and we can get you the digital copy too. But this is Expanding Middle Housing Options, a guide to local middle housing regulations. This is, again, a what questions should you be asking, what have other communities done and what have they learned document. It is not, here's the policy we think you should pass for your community type of document. And so certainly something I would encourage you. The last thing I will tell you, I was just talking to Andrea and Ryan before this. We've done this in other communities in North Dakota, and we're prepared, unless you all look at me and say, please don't, to do this. We get a chance to ask a colleague of Summer and I's, we have a whole livable communities team that does work on all types of livable communities issues, not just housing, transportation, quality of place, all types of things for technical assistance on things. And we've done housing code audits where we've went into communities and said, here's what your existing housing code says. Here's some perceived barriers from experts in this industry that have done this in these other communities, things you might consider, things you might look at. Here's the way it's worded now. Here's some things that you might not realize or that developers may have told you and just hasn't seen to do. And so we're prepared to ask for technical assistance. I can't guarantee it, but I can tell you it certainly will be on our high priority list. We've really enjoyed getting to work with Ryan and Andrea and the ongoing dialogue we've had. I would also tell you, you have a good friend of mine, Colin, who works in your planning department as well. Good guy. And glad you have him here in Grand Forks. So with that, unless Summer has anything to add, we'd happily try and answer any questions.
Josh, I actually had a comment on the, just want to leave it out there in terms of the local and state model ordinance that we have. As Josh was mentioning, it's the operative word is model. The reason we have a model ordinance is to just give an idea to local and state governments saying this is how an ordinance can be written. And when you do read the local and state model ordinance, it provides a lot of different options for every definition, every clause. Yeah. When we were drafting this model ordinance, we realized that we just cannot have one set of definition and one set of clause for any specific zoning legislation. That is the reason we have every option, every clause has like 3 different options that local or state governments can use. Because we understand every state and every local community is different. We don't want to have a cookie cutter model ordinance for everyone. Hence, there are different options for different clauses. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank both of you for the presentation and being willing to take the time to educate on this topic. I will happily leave here with a hard copy of that if you've got it. Okay, thank you. Just a couple of brief thoughts. I think it was a couple months back I said that in this meeting that I felt that like housing affordability was the issue, and I still feel like that. That slide, I think it was number 2 there, that showed some of the different factors, I think is a great way of thinking about it, right? Again, there's not, I appreciate that there's not like a silver bullet. I've brought up the missing middle as a term before, but I'm under no illusions that is like the silver bullet to like solve everything. And in fact, even what comes before this body is fairly limited, like maybe 1 or 2, 3 if you squint, maybe we deal with directly. But I'll also say that for our city staff that are here, I mean, this is really where local government can shine. Like, please, like, take this and run with it. I think there's so much that could benefit this place that we live when the information is in the right hands. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's your hurdle.
All right, I'll have a comment if I may.
Yeah.
I agree. I love the housing initiative. As a realtor, I'm super excited because we do struggle with that. I'm a little, I wish we didn't give all the incentives to the builders. Because as a realtor, a builder calls me, and I've built houses, I've worked with developers, I've done a lot of development, and I'm a little bit nervous about a builder coming in and building, and I love you all, my builder friends, so I almost feel bad for saying this, but we need to figure out how to get that money back to the buyer. So a builder gets incentives, they get the low-cost loans. We can't get people to sell houses now because guess what? Everybody refinanced 3 years ago, 2 years ago, right? So you're 2% financing and you've got to move to something at 6%, 6.5%. There's got to be a lot of money, exchanged somehow, some way. So how is it that we can work with builders to build these homes with these incentives, but not work on a market value rate to turn around and sell these houses? I mean, I built a 1,600 square foot townhome 3 years ago, pre-COVID essentially, and I know what I can sell that for now. I know what I'm having to build it for now. So we have to figure out how to pass these incentives on to the buyers. So that's my
Brilliant.
my comment from
Yeah, I agree.
from a buyer, from a seller standpoint, and done a lot of building. So
Agreed. Mr. Budke, you got
Just one other thought. I have a different perspective, obviously, but or different background. But I love that. A couple of other things that come to mind would be in the slides here we had that test fit from Milner. I think you said it seems instructive that hasn't actually happened.
Have you ever been to Milner, North Dakota?
I
have.
I can't say I have. But what I thought of was new construction costs. Right, that was another one of these facets on this slide. It's really hard for any new construction to be affordable housing, right? Unless it's directly subsidized. But I think what this whole conversation is revolving around is the idea of broadly affordable housing, or sort of small a affordable housing. So I think as this conversation moves forward, I think I just encourage everyone to look at existing building stock, also existing lots that are ready for redevelopment or maybe intensification. Also, there's a lot of bedrooms that we got to get off the sidelines in this whole fight. So, yeah, that's my last thought. Thank you.
We should have had our one developer that has a lot of it stay.
So the most recent development I did was infill. It was a few blocks a street that was a dead street, and we took advantage of it. We hardly have any specials, which is amazing. For a 2,000 square foot townhome, you build one now down on the south end of town, and you're going to have $40,000, $40,000 in specials. So I think it's the building cost, which is where I'm encouraged that the builders are going to get the incentives and all of that fun stuff, but we've got to make sure that we pass it down to the buyers, and that's where I get a little nervous. Builder's going to look and go, hey, I can sell this house for $550,000. Forget that I got the incentive from the state, right?
Right, that's what happens.
Can you just expand a little bit more on do you have any thoughts on how you get it into the hands of the consumer? I mean, do you give it directly to the consumer instead of the builder? Do you do it through loan buy downs? I mean, what are your thoughts, or what have you seen that's been successful?
Yeah, I think right now, interest rate buy down would be a slam dunk, right? Bank of North Dakota, why could we not utilize our own state bank to help? We can buy down interest rates all day long, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. So, yeah, interest rates, and yeah, if we can get construction costs cheaper and say, you know what, you can't charge market value for that, let's readjust the market that way. You've got 1,400 square foot townhomes going up not too far from me that are crazy expensive for 1,400 square feet,
How much are they?
like 400,000.
Yeah. I'm in that age group.
Yeah.
Kids are going away, starting to go, well, what do I do? Yeah, it's more money
Mine now,
than what I get for mine.
Yeah, we built ours, pre-COVID pricing, we moved in right at COVID time, and it was less than $4,000, and now they're going around $500,000.
For a townhouse.
Yeah.
Half.
And I'm not saying it's the builders taking advantage of the buyers either, it's just that expensive. But I love the idea of being able to build something less expensive in the infield places, but we got to figure out how to get it back to the buyer.
Agreed.
Are you seeing, if I may, I was going to say, I'm exactly in that position. We got a 4,000 square foot home we've lived in for 45 years. We have got it sold, but we're trying to locate, and exactly what you said, we're being shown places half the size that are 20, 25, 30 years old, and they're asking for as much as what, I mean, it's, the prices are ridiculous in places. And the other comment was going to be, I think it might be a little tough unless it's a bigger enough area because of the zoning. If you have a bunch of single-family houses there already, to come in and get them to agree to have fourplexes, whatever. But I think what we need to stress is to more of the developers is that plan this in it to start with. And then if people buy next to it, they have no complaints. They know it's there. But infilling in some places, unless it's a big enough area where you can have a whole neighborhood of it, you may have some problems.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Kuhn. You live in a rough neighborhood, though. We're neighbors.
I was wondering. So, if I might just add to the discussion, because there was a question asked about what's worked and what hasn't worked. I will tell you, I want to go back to, and I put the slide 11 up, I think you can see it on your screen, about the financing innovations. So my understanding, and I have not seen the bill language, right? We're waiting for Governor Armstrong's budget address next week, because that will kind of put all the additional detail on this. But I know, at least in the financing innovations, part of that is to buy down that construction loan, so the interest rate piece of it, which helps drop the price. In addition, at least something that we've seen success, not in this space, but in, so I want to be clear, this is not a missing middle example, but in the Housing Incentive Fund, there were requirements for builders when they were tapping into the Housing Incentive Fund and building apartment complexes and workforce housing, that they reserved X number of units for certain wage groups, worker types, et cetera. That might be something, I don't know if that's going to be included at this point in time, and I'm not even telling you that's something we might be pushing for, but I just know that as an example is one way that you've used a little bit of the incentive and stick approach of, yeah, you get this lower loan, but then you've got to make sure you're setting aside X number of units to ensure that it's not just, yep, you got the lower loan and you can charge everybody more for it. So I think
One of my biggest fears is what you're saying, is that you go, okay, now we're going to set aside and there's going to be income levels and wage.
Yep.
Oh, that's going to blow the whole thing. Because then you're taking all of us out of a certain income level that we don't have we have a house that would be perfect for not a starter home, but a second home or a third home to move families up. Well, we're not going to be able to leave it.
To be clear, like I'm not saying it's for all of the units. I'm saying, if you build 5 units, one of them has to be reserved for a certain income level. And again, that's what was successful in the housing incentive program, and they were using that more for large apartment complexes. But it's just one example of how tools have been used to help folks in the past.
So your clients, your people, the elderly people that are trying to downsize, what I assume you've done surveys, things like that, what are they looking for? Are they looking for no yard, no shoveling, or are they looking for a smaller house? Are they looking for a townhouse? Are they looking for a fourplex where they don't have to do anything? Maybe an eightplex? What do you hear most often that they're looking for when they want to downsize?
Commissioner Reichert, it depends. I mean, what we're hearing mostly is there are no options. My option is a single-family home or an apartment complex. Or a townhome that they can't afford, right? I mean, that's the other thing. And so,
but I mean, if we incentivize a bunch of eightplexes or fourplexes, are they going to want that, or are they going to say that's not what I'm looking for?
And Summer can probably speak to this from the new research but I'll just touch on this point, is that I will say, in my experience, and again, Bismarck, not Grand Forks, so I want to be very clear, and I understand different communities, different places. When we did some of this, 2010 to 2018, so it's been a few years since I've been there, but when we did this, whether it was row homes, townhomes, fourplexes, eightplexes, and again, different time frame, get it, different economic circumstances than where we're at now. Within 18 months, I never heard a builder come back and say we couldn't fill it. Didn't matter what it was. Now, I will tell you one of the things, just given my role now, that we didn't do in Bismarck, that I would encourage you to make a part of whatever advancements and what your role is as planning and zoning is encourage more age-friendly design type features. Have at least one zero-step entry, because you might not have mobility issues today, but you might have a leg that you need assistance, or it's easier to get in and out. By the way, that's not just good for older adults. For folks with young families, as somebody who hauled 3 kids up and down 4 steps to get in my house every time that I had to get in and out of my garage, that was a pain in the butt. And it had been really nice to have one entry that was just, we can wheel everybody in the stroller in the house before we let them run around, type of situation. And so I want to be clear, when we say age-friendly design, we're looking at it from the lens of older adults, but that doesn't mean it's just good for older adults, and that doesn't mean you can't build with steps. It just means let's make sure we have access that is accessible in one point of place. And there are ways, and I'm going to tell you this, and again, to any builder and to my builder friends, if they're listening anywhere, they'll tell you they can't do it, that we live in North Dakota with climates. With grading, you can do it. It's just they haven't traditionally done it or been asked to do it. And so I can give you examples and send you photos of examples in North Dakota of where, nope, they just graded it and it looks, you would never, in fact, we did a missing middle housing walking tour in West Fargo last year. We walked up to this place and we're looking at it and I went, there's no step entry into this place. And it wasn't until I stopped and really focused, they just graded the sidewalk up that way. So, Summer, do you have anything on terms of the preference piece of it from the recent preference survey before?
I think, Josh, you also put it really correctly, saying we want more age-friendly design. And in fact, I'll go beyond that and say we actually support more universally designed units. And it's not only for older adults, but for all ages and all abilities. That's one. The other one, I think the question also was, are we seeing older adults wanting to move into different housing options? And we have seen across the country that as you are growing old, the need for a bigger house is not there anymore. And that's the reason that we have seen a lot of older adults want to downsize. And that's where the housing option is not there. The housing supply or housing inventory is not there for older adults to buy in or buy a house which suits for them. There are various reasons for that, but lots of times, even if you have certain housing options may not be age-friendly or not universally designed, so older adults may not be able to do it, but also the zoning would not allow them to have that kind of housing option. So that's the reason why we advocate for middle housing, to allow that these houses can be built, this type of housing can be built. And obviously, we do not want to say all older adults want this, but majority of I think in the third or fourth slide when I showed the survey, majority of the older adults want to age in place. They also don't want to move out of the community. So, for example, there's a huge movement for ADUs also across the country, where zoning changes are being done to allow ADUs, which is accessory dwelling units, being allowed to be built in the same property, where older adults can move into the smaller unit and then rent out the other one. Not only will it provide you downsizing, but also provide you extra income. So again, not the silver bullet as you had rightly put in earlier, saying it's not the only solution, but it is a solution for providing more housing options, I would say.
Thank you. I think I stirred this one up, Mr. Budke, again, so. All right. No, I think that's good. Anybody else have any other very great commission, great, you guys, smart, great questions, great comments. Let's roll. We have one item of business before we adjourn, correct?
Correct. So we have, on the MPO board, we have one rep of this board, or of this body, that sits on the executive board. Al Grasser has been our as the city engineer, has been on that spot, and it's time for his, I think every 2 years, it's a 2-year term that we've done in the past, and it just happens to be up this year. So I received something from the MPO that his term was up this month. So with that, we can certainly act on that now, or since it wasn't on the agenda, if you want to kick it to next month, I'm
Mr.
open
Grasser,
to
would you be
whatever.
interested in serving on this board, continuing to serve on this board?
I can continue, yes.
There you go. Huh?
Calling me.
Mr. Riker.
I move to appoint Mr. Grasser to the board.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn. Any further discussion? All those in favor of Mr. Grasser staying on the MPO board? Signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. That was, like Mr. Kuhn said, the old-fashioned railroad. Thank you, Mr. Grasser, for what you do. All right, with that, any other business? Move to adjourn somebody?
Yeah,
Others?
you're good.
All those in favor of adjournment? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.